Tess Monahan get her name? I think Monahan is one of the Baltimore last names. I grew up 2 doors down from the Monahans. There was Monahan Lounge and Tavern in Woodlawn. The bakery still is.
Still is.
Still is. And as I found out later, after the fact, it is also the maiden name of Jacques Kelly's mother. And if there is anyone more Baltimore than Jacques Kelly, I don't know who it is. So that was where Monahan came from. As I said, I really wanted to write a quintessentially Baltimore character. And I felt like my family was not quintessentially Baltimore. I'm not a native. We came here when I was 6 years old. My family's very Southern. And I felt that's, that stark contrast. And as for Tess, her full name is Teresa Esther, which again reflects the two cultures, her Irish Catholic father and her Jewish mother. And I love the idea that she would be known as Tesser, which she is sometimes referred to as a kid, or because I loved Madeleine L'Engle's A Wrinkle in Time, and I was having a sly joke about Tesseract. So that is where the name Tess Monahan comes from. There, I see a red sleeve. So shout out.
What about scripts coming up and movies being made of this?
Movies, scripts, Hollywood.
All that jazz.
Tess came so close. Tess came so close to pilot season, and it didn't quite make it. And I have seen the film based on my book, Every Secret Thing. It was just finished about a week ago. I saw it back in October in a rough stage. It is now being submitted to film festivals. I think it was definitely too late to be submitted to Sundance, and I think it missed the deadline to be submitted to Berlin, because Berlin's going on right now. But it is a really small, independent film, but Diane Lane is in it, Elizabeth Banks, Dakota Fanning. It was written by Nicole Holofcener, who wrote Friends with Money and that movie with James Gandolfini and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And it was directed by Amy Berg, who it's her first feature film, but she's done 2 really well-received documentaries, including West of Memphis. And the whole thing happened because Frances McDormand lives in the same apartment building as my literary agent, who handed her the book.
Good luck.
And it is,
6 degrees.
I have gotten to know Ms. McDormand well enough that I'm allowed to call her Fran, and I have seen her library, which is very impressive, and she's even sent me some photographs from the location of Olive Kitteridge, where she's playing the title character. Pretty cool, for HBO. So she's amazing, and she deserves all the credit. This took 8 years. 8 years to get this movie made. And there were many times when she said, "We're really going to do this." And I'm like, sure. Everything else, some stuff has been optioned. The options have lapsed. This book is just beginning to sort of venture out into the world, and we'll see. I tend to be pretty down to earth about it. It's a check if it happens, but it's not going to define me, I guess. To say it. Yes.
I have a question about kind of your other female characters.
Okay.
I love the strength of Whitney and Tess, but like Heloise and Natalie and some of the other books, they all go through this. They've had some pretty tough lives, and they've got this grit. Is there a role model in your life that kind of?
Is there a role model in my life for the really tough characters? Wow, I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, I guess I've known so many women, and so many have been strong and determined. If I said my mom, that was not kind of creepy. My mother inspired Heloise the prostitute. I just think I've known so many terrific women, and I'm really committed to writing women's stories. I think I felt that. Boy, I'll tell some tales out of school right now. So we just had the Edgar nominations, and that means I think it's May 1st, we will have the Edgar ceremony, which is for the best achievements in crime fiction. And I didn't have a novel out in 2013 for the first time, so I certainly, I wasn't feeling overlooked myself. It wasn't like, oh gosh, what about me? It was great to be kind of clear-headed about it and have absolutely no envy or, not a certain wistfulness. And I was asked to write a piece about The theme this year for the Edgar Annual is women in crime fiction. And I did a very interesting quantifiable survey. I just limited myself to the best novel category because it's probably the one that it's the largest sample. 900 to 1,000 books are submitted in this category every year. Since 1954, let's see if I can remember my own numbers. 15 women writers have won for Best Novel since 1954. And you're like, oh yeah, that's because of the bad old days. 5 of them were in the first 10 years. But that's not what I'm really concerned about. I don't care about the gender of who writes. I care about what kind of stories resonate and are considered universal enough to win prizes. Those stories are almost always male-centric. And in the case of the Edgar Award for Best Novel, there are only 2 books with minorities that have ever won the Edgar. And the first one, again, is like back in the 60s, or actually it's late 50s, Room Enough to Swing by Ed Lacey, one of the first African-American detectives written by a white man, but still, there's the character. And then, of course, you have Tony Hillerman, who won for his 2 Navajo detectives. Here's what's really interesting to me. So there's a terrific New York writer named S.J. Roseanne. It's a woman. S.J. writes about 2 people. Lydia Chin, a young woman who's a Chinese American, and she writes about Bill Smith, who is, a traditional, laconic, white private eye. Both types of books, they're partners. She's been nominated for the Edgar for a Lydia book. She's been nominated for the Edgar for a Bill Smith book. Bill Smith book won. I looked at the 6 nominees for the Edgar this year. 2 women, great. 1 book about women. Several books about the deaths of beautiful women that have really moved men. To the point where I actually said to some friends, I was like, so there's the formula. Kill a beautiful woman, have a man feel really bad about it. There is our universal story. I mean, I'm really concerned about there being female-centric stories. And it's what I can do. I mean, I'm very good friends with Dennis Lehane and George Pelecanos. And I was there when they started breaking out with their work, and it's fabulous. And they have something to say about men and violence in our society, and what does it mean to be a man, and how is a man shaped by violence or his aversion to violence. And I can't tell those stories as well as they can. Those are not my stories, but I have a lot to say about women. And so I keep coming back to the topic of women. And I have in some quarters, possibly when I've had a drink or 2, said, in writing this book, I realized that what I've been trying is no less than to write a cultural history of women in my lifetime. After I'm Gone begins 2 weeks after my birthday. It begins on February 14th, 1959, when 2 people meet at a dance. And it ends in an unspecified, it ends at the end of 2013. Or is it 2012? I get a little confused. I think it ends at the end of 2012. I finished it at the end of 2012. Yeah, it had to be. So, it's, what are the stories of women's lives? How many are there? I mean, they're probably infinite. And that's, what I'm really after. That's my quarry.